On today's World Insight, deeper, wider, better cooperation between China and Africa with growing trade and aid for pandemic recovery. At the 8th Ministerial Conference of the Forum in China-Africa Cooperation in Senegal, what's on the agenda?
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei from Beijing. The program is coming to you live from the city. The 8th Ministerial Conference of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation is underway in Senegal. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech to the opening ceremony via video link. Trade, infrastructure, and the ongoing pandemic topped the forum's agenda. Also up for talks are digital innovation and green development. This forum follows Friday's release of a white paper from China's State Council Information Office detailing the country's cooperation with Africa. The paper, titled China and Africa in a New Era, a Partnership of Equals, details what it means to build a global community with a shared future. The paper says China has been Africa's largest trading partner since 2009, and Chinese direct investment in Africa has surpassed the $43 billion by the year 2020. It also points out China has provided the emergency anti-pandemic supplies to 50 African countries and the African Union Commission. And high-level exchanges like the forum are also crucial to build bilateral relations.
The key to a close China-Africa relationship and a deep bond of friendship lies in the everlasting spirit, which features sincere friendship and equality, win-win for mutual benefit and common development, fairness and justice, and progress with the times with openness and inclusiveness.
For more on China and Africa relations, joining us in Dakar via Skype, Hannah Ryder, CEO of Development Reimagine. Hannah, haven't seen you for a long time. Good to see you again. In Beijing, Joe Rong,
it's wonderful to see you.
Analyst from the Chongyang Institute of Financial Studies at Renmin University of China. Also in Beijing, Ms. He Wenping, professor from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, who's been doing Africa research for decades. And in Nairobi, on the phone, Ali Khan Sachu, CEO at Reach Management. Welcome to all of you. There's a lot to talk about today in terms of China-Africa development. In fact, we have a lot to talk about every day because the relationship, the deepened strategic partnership has really been taking place between China and the African continent. Ms. Ryder.
There is a lot to talk about today, not just because of that overarching perspective, but also because we've had some very important announcements from the conference today here in Dakar. President Xi's announced a number of new initiatives, new donations in terms of vaccines, joint production, also support for Africa's financial institutions, a number of priorities that the African countries have been putting forward in the run-up to FOCAC, coordinated by Senegal, the co-chair, and it's looking like this partnership is paying off.
Ms. He, it seems that particularly about the pandemic today, everybody is concerned about the Omicron variant, which likely to be further information coming out about what it means for all of us. But certainly sharing of vaccines, sharing of treatment pills against COVID-19, very crucial. But if you look at the big African countries, even like South Africa, only 25% of vaccination rate. Certainly there's a lot of space for improvement. What role can China play? China already answered that today in the conference.
Yes, you are absolutely right. Right now, Africa is facing this vaccine, deficit. just like before, like they are facing the development deficit, like the investment deficit. But now when the whole human being, we are dealing with this pandemic, this challenge, once again, Africa now is facing this another deficit. So for like China, we are the biggest developing country. We are also the only, I think, developing country can produce this vaccine quite earlier time. We have offered as many as 2 billion those doses for our Chinese people. And we also have provided a lot of assistance, those vaccine assistance, either export those vaccines to many countries in the world. So now I heard President Xi Jinping already made this promise. We will offer as many as 1 billion vaccines to African continent to improve those you know, the vaccination, those rates, just you said, just only 25 something, lowest one in whole of the world. So we need to offer our contribution and our assistance.
And of course, at the early stage of China's fight against the pandemic, our African friends have also been extending their hands in providing China with some of the equipment and also particularly supplies. Certainly, this is coming both ways. On the other hand, Mr. Zhou, tell me more about, you know, what it really means, you know, when we translate rhetorics into specifics, into actions, and how is this likely to be tested this time by this pandemic?
I think what China is doing right now is just we put our words into the action. We not only send dispatch a lot of medical team, but also would like to establish a lot of medical centers in Africa. And also, we will share our experience, how China control the pandemics. And also, we will just do more transfer, what we say is vaccine to African countries. Right now, we are doing something like we like to giving first, taking less. That is to taking before, giving before taking. And then we don't want the African friend to just get something in return. We would like to help them first. We don't ask them to, with certain kind of political strings attached, any kind of condition we don't have. So we sincerely have African people. African people also see China as a true friend. A true friend is very important for Africa. Right now, they really face a difficult time, but since we have been supporting each other during the trying time, right now, both of Africa and China are very confident with our marvelous future.
And now let me go to on the phone, Ali Khan Sachu. I hope you could hear me well, Mr. Sachu.
Perfectly.
Thank you so much. This is really like a war in a way, a global war against the pandemic. Earlier times, people have fight literally a war, but now our generation is very different. We know that many of the efforts being made by both sides, China and Africa, when it comes to cooperation, now has to bear with the brunt of the war against the pandemic. Tell us more about what is the situation in Africa and how do you see, you know, the latest announcement made by China and the also cooperation, deepening of cooperation between the two sides, likely to provide some solutions at least?
So just starting with the pandemic, you know, Africa was fortunate in many respects in that we have not been as badly affected as other continents, Latin America, North America, and Europe in particular. I mean, some of this is a failure of our statistics to capture the caseload and some of the mortality rates. But the overarching problem remains that we are very under-vaccinated as a continent. So President Xi's promise for 1 billion vaccines is, you know, very appropriate, and its timing couldn't be better. So I think in that respect, we're very, very grateful. With respect to the China-Africa relationship, you know, it's an old one going back many decades, of course, but it's really been the dominant relationship for the last 20 years between the African continent and China. But I think, we're moving through very fluid times, and
Absolutely.
it needs to be recalibrated. And I think that's what we're seeing, a recalibration, a cementing of the relationship, and positioning it for the future. And I think those are the messages I'm taking away at the moment.
If you talk about China and Africa, the benefits needs to be coming from both sides, and also the kinds of cooperation ideas need to be coming from both sides. That's very crucial in this latest stage of development. Ms. Ryder, tell me more about that, because earlier we see more Chinese investment into African continent, more helping to build infrastructures, and now there's also more cooperation about technology transfer, and also cooperation about the different models of development. Tell me more about what's your observation?
Well, there's very often this narrative that China is somehow either winning too much from African countries or the other way around, in terms of African countries only draining from China and kind of begging in a sense. I think what we see today is something which is much more nuanced than that and much more complex. Of course, building infrastructure also brings benefits to Chinese companies, but in the same way, also supporting supporting African countries with vaccines, of course, is also an opportunity for local manufacturing in Africa. What we're seeing through the new announcements that have come today is much more of an African perspective on where things need to go and where the relationship needs to go. I think that's an evolution in the win-win, in a sense, and much more complexity to it.
Yeah, I was fortunate and honored this afternoon to host a conference on China-Africa cooperation. We were sharing a lot of wisdoms, both from China and also African continent. As you know, both sides have a lot of Asian wisdoms that are very relevant today. I remember people talk about some of the proverbs coming from African continent. The proverb sometimes really tells you about history. Of course, one of the most well-known, ladies and gentlemen, is that if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go further, you want to go together. So that's very clear in terms of cooperation. But there's also another African proverb that I learned, that you will never be able to build a house for the last summer, which means that things are always changing. We need to update. We need to deepening the kind of cooperation we already have. On that, I want to go to you, Ms. He. For example, about economic, trade, infrastructure building. These are some of the fundamentals China-Africa cooperation. Where are we now? What are some of the most important points that you are looking at in order to assess the quality of that cooperation?
Well, we are seeing in that white paper you just mentioned, released just days ago, there is a definition saying now we are at the best time in the China-Africa relations. So now is the best time. Why we call it the best time? Because not only saying we are reached into saying a comprehensive partnership time, and also like all those development projects, now we are entering into high quality development period. Before, maybe we just saying those speed matters, counting on how many training for human resources training, we counting numbers. But now we focus on more, deeper, and about the quality. So how is the quality like those projects also? Those projects, for example, the Kenya, like Mombasa and Nairobi, that railway. Before, like Tanzania Railway, Zambia, we just finished those projects and handed over, called the 10 key projects. And the Chinese engineer, all those constructing people left, and not just the 10 key.
Right.
So you cannot guarantee the sustainability about those projects. But now we remain there, saying after finished, and then we continue joint, make a company to run them. So it's called the construction and then operating, all of them. So let you completely getting to know how to run the project. So this is the way, high quality development. So that's why I fully agree this definition. Now we're entering into the best time of this China-Africa cooperation.
Mr. Sachu, you know, I want to report to all of you about this. During the forum that I hosted in the afternoon today, very encouraging messages coming from both sides. People are having a lot of new ideas, and also they're counting very in detail as to how to implement these new ideas. Some of from the, you know, the construction companies, particularly the railways and also the roads construction. They're talking about from the very beginning of designing the project to selecting the type of materials to eventually build the bridges or the roads, and to incorporate the African laborers and workers into the whole process, so they will get trained, and when the Chinese team left, they would know how to do the maintenance and everything from then on. So there is a lot of details already, not on the mind, not on paper, but really being implemented. That's very encouraging, Mr. Sachu.
Of course it is. I think, you know, any relationship develops and becomes more nuanced. And I think we're clearly seeing more nuance and sophistication, more beneficiation, more local content, a sense of how to make it sustainable. So, you know, absolutely, I think, you know, it's interesting being here in Nairobi, for example. 10, 15 years ago, you would see many Chinese laborers on the roads. Today, you will see maybe a supervisor, but the work is being done by local Kenyans. And I think, you know, just that, the optics of that sends a very powerful message that both sides are onboarding a good practice and are improving the relationship. Look, I mean, you know, Chinese investment has been transformative for the continent, our roads, our railways, and really it's crucial that that investment continues. You know, we have hit an economic slowdown here on the continent. The pandemic was a trigger for that, and I think, therefore, the relationship carries more importance in the current economic environment as well.
Absolutely, well said. In order to have more idea for those that are not in China, that are not on the African continent, about the real thing going on between China and Africa, let me share just some of the numbers. Some of you already mentioned. According to the white paper on China-African cooperation recently being published, the trade volume between China and Africa has increased 20 times over the past 2 decades. China has been Africa's largest trading partner for 12 consecutive years. So far this year, trade volume hit nearly $140 billion, a record 40% increase from last year, despite of the pandemic. Africa's exports to China also rose close to $60 billion. Since the pandemic, China has extended assistance to over 50 African countries with 120 batches of medical supplies, as well as about 200 million doses of vaccines so far. And of course, that number is going to increase with the latest pledge by the Chinese president. Mr. Zhou, go to you also about that point. You know, it's much more than just numbers, even though we read numbers. But behind these numbers, the nuance and also the real cooperation that are taking shape, shall we say, cooperation 2.0 in a way, is already taking place.
I think we all know that President Xi Jinping just stated Chinese position on the cooperation between China and Africa. The most important are 4 words. Number 1 is that is sincerity. Number 2 is a real result. And number 3 is amity. And the last one is good faith. And China is doing its best to implement all its promise to honor all the commitment to our African friends. Well, and we also have the several principles. Number 1 is we never try to interfere in Africans' domestic affairs, and we never try to do imposition on the will of our own. And we also just try to respect and our African friends to choose their own way for their own development.
I see.
Which, yeah. So this is something behind, and we respect each other's core interest and major concerns. From everything that it seems China and Africa, and for heart by heart, we just stand together. And even China promise, even we grown stronger, we will still think Africa as our friends in equality. So a lot of things, Africa really regard China a better and a real friend than the others.
All right. When we talk about the African continent, it's a huge and vast and exciting continent we are talking about. Every country has its own circumstances, that's very for sure. Ms. Ryder, therefore I want to go to you about that. Now, at this point, the world is fluid. It's changing so fast. And nobody knows where is it going, even though we all have good faith for the best wishes of the world. But, you know, at this point, how important it is to have a trustworthy partner, that you know that someone will have your back, both for African countries and also for China.
Look, I think, and I'm going to talk from an African perspective here.
Sure.
It's very important to have a trustworthy partner. I think it's very important to have a partner who is interested in your future and who can chart your future together. Now, that future for African countries is, and I know they're all different, every single country is different, but there is a joint African development agenda. It's called Agenda 2063. And that envisions reducing poverty at twice the rate of China, which is incredibly fast and incredibly challenging. It envisions Africa becoming the world's manufacturing hub by 2063 and general improvement in green development and so on. So what's really important is, and what we see is, I think, through the FOCAT mechanism, is an opportunity for governments to engage, but the African governments to speak with the Chinese government, say, this is where we want to go. This is what we would like from you. And the Chinese government to also say, this is what we would like from you. It is a...
We're losing a little bit voice coming from Ms. Ryder. But another point I want to ask is about, you know, when we're talking about having each other's back, that's very crucial in today's dramatically changing world. But how do we see the fact, Mr. Satru, that for most of the African countries, whether they know China directly, they look at the eyes of the Chinese and say, okay, that's what's going on. Or they heard what's going on in China through a third voice, which means there might be deficit of information. So how do you see that we see each other directly in the eyes, not through others' eyes, Mr. Satru?
So I think, you know, obviously you're referring to perceptions and probably propaganda that's occasionally put out. You know, we've seen propaganda about China wanting to take away the airport in Uganda in the last couple of days. I think the relationship has moved on. I think, you know, Africans have agency. They also have a clear understanding of the positive. I think eyes are wide open, and I think similarly with China, China, you know, has high expectations of Africa, and I think, you know, Africans appreciate that fact. I mean, you can see that. You know, Africa is not a country. There are many countries, but, you know, there is a good alignment with the core issues for President Xi and China. So I think, you know, overall there is much more awareness between both entities, and I think there's a growing maturity and understanding in that relationship. So I feel confident that both sides are very clear-eyed in their assessment of each other.
Right. I want to ask you even further, Mr. Satru, with your expertise. I mean, African countries have had very unique history. For example, 100 years ago or 50 and 60 years ago, there's a decolonization process going on in the African continent that formed up the position of Africa and the spirits of Africans. And now with the new development, Africa is being termed as the rising continent. Many have hope in Africa. And of course, things are a little bit challenging for everyone now. But how do you see, Africa see itself, and how does it reflect upon its history so that it knows how to, at this point, maintain a good balance for its own best interests?
That's a very interesting question. And I think, part of Africa maintaining a better balance was because of the arrival of China particularly in the last 20 years. It gave Africa optionality and an ability to gain more leverage at the negotiating table with old colonial powers who still have a serious foothold on the continent. So I think, one of the most important results of this China-Africa relationship was giving Africa options, strengthening Africa's position at the negotiating table, and I think that is a gift that China gave the continent, and that's for sure.
I think that's a beautiful point, a fair point as well. Ms. Ryder is coming back to us now. Please share some thoughts on that as well. We have about 1.5 minutes left. Ms. Ryder.
Yes, well, I think what I was trying to explain a little bit was the future, the African future, and where that might be heading in terms of increasing manufacturing, increasing investment, small and medium enterprises development. And that partnership with China, I think, is African leaders are really trying to take advantage of it as much as they can. And that agency that it's being expressed is very important. And I hope it will also be expressed with other development partners too, set the bar in many ways.
Before we go, very briefly, thank you very much. 30 seconds for each of the two Chinese guests, Professor He.
Well, I think this Senegal, this FOCAC meeting, I think is very important and also very unique. Why? Because during this pandemic time, and then we still overcome a lot of difficulties and make this FOCAC meeting, available. And now a lot of discussion going on, and the new roadmap has been made. So this is very encouraging thing. Let's join hands together to make China-Africa better and the best.
I think it's a demonstration of faith in each other, isn't it, as you said? And last but not least, Mr. Zhou.
Yes.
Final thoughts.
Yes. I'm sure that the next 20 years, the friendship between China and Africa and the cooperation between China and Africa will be more and more flourishing, and we will share the community of the future. Thank you.
This is not a relationship that's only warming when there is important political meetings like what we are talking about today. It has been a relationship that has gone through the test of time, through decades. We hope it is going to its exhilarating 2.0 version right now. Hannah Ryder, Zhou Rong, He Wenping, Ali Khan Satu, thank you so much for joining us. All the best to every one of you. Appreciate it. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching and see you tomorrow. And all the best to our friends in China and in Africa.